Okay, I think we can start already. Hello to everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Manuel Ballester, and I will be the moderator of this webinar, where we will discuss about how to cover merging cellular and satellite connectivity to maximize the coverage. On one side, we have Luigi Capobianco, which is the SVP head of sales at FlowLife, and also Stefan Bernard, which is head of business development at Cellular. Remember that you can leave your questions in the chat, and as soon as we finish the presentation, we will go through all the questions. So please, Luigi.
Thank you, Manuel. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're connecting from. And today, as Manuel anticipated, we're going to speak about how you can uncover the power of satellite and cellular connectivity combined. And we start from something which may be obvious for many of us, which is the fact that devices using low power wide area networks are rising as a number. The applications are rising, and there are many needs that these kind of devices have, and many needs that the market needs to respond to. And these needs are, first of all, a true global coverage. True global coverage is not just about covering the majority of the countries with multiple networks per country, but it's covering also countries in which there are permanent roaming restrictions, and it's also covering areas of the world where there is no actual cellular coverage on the ground, so not terrestrial cellular coverage. It also means being able to cope with data privacy acts. Another important need is to have simplified logistics. So as much as possible, having the opportunity to use one SKU to remotely configure this SKU and to access this kind of service via attractive commercials. Because we've seen in the past very often that many IoT applications couldn't actually fly because of the connectivity related costs, which were too high. Every connected device around the world at a certain point in life will need some support during its life cycle. Therefore, it's very important for devices using LP1s to have great SLAs, to have 24/7 support and support provided by organizations that can actually troubleshoot and act technically as quick as possible. And of course, the more devices we have connecting to the network, the more important it is that these devices are connected safely and securely from a cybersecurity point of view. Now, it's important that all these needs are accessible via a single solution, so that this device can take advantage of all these options without having to change from a solution provider to the other. So what we've been doing at FlowLife, what we do every day at FlowLife, is working to provide a fully integrated, globally uniform, and centrally managed connectivity service to all our customers. With these three keywords, we mean that our connectivity solution includes core networks dedicated to IoT, multiple core networks, real-time billing system, again, dedicated to the IoT applications, a SIM applet, and a SIM management tool to perform over-the-air updates and to provide remote management of each single SIM card, even after they've been deployed to the field. And of course, the connectivity management platform that helps to orchestrate all these kind of things. The foundation of this solution, the foundation with which we put together a single solution to reply to all these needs, is what we call our hyperlocal global network. And this is what we offer to all our customers. This is what our customers can experience in different parts of the world. And this is how we think that the current market can respond to all the challenges that connectivity is posing to many enterprises. What do we mean with hyperlocal global network? We mean a cellular network centrally managed and centrally operated, which is deployed in different regions of the world, as you can see from the slide. Why is it deployed in several regions of the world? For multiple reasons. One reason, which may be the most obvious, is to comply with permanent roaming regulations where needed. there is Brazil, there's China, there is India mentioned here. These are all countries where you need to access the cellular network with a local solution. But on top of this, there's also data privacy regulations that you need to comply with, as well as reducing the latency as much as possible. And this is important for high throughput applications as well as for low throughput applications. So by putting together what is today the largest accessible cellular network in the world, we wanted to make sure that a single device can access all required networks, all required places in the world with a single SKU, managed by a single billing system, managed by a single connectivity management platform. Now, how can a device access all these coverage? How can it access all these core networks, all these features? There are several ways. The most common way in which a device can access a distributed network is by using a multi-IMSI SIM card. So a SIM card that can host multiple IMSIs within its sublet, within the memory. The advantage of this is that it's a standard SIM card. It can change between IMSIs without having to move to a different tariff plan, without having to move to a different provider. So the same SIM card can host up to 10 IMSIs, and it's possible at no cost to move between an IMSI to the other. One IMSI can be used as a bootstrap, one IMSI can be a specific local IMSI from Brazil used to comply with the local regulations there. This is a very important feature for many different applications, because in this way, even if it's a static device, let's take a smart meter, it can be manufactured centrally in a country, let's say Europe or Germany, in Europe, for example, using a single SKU without having to store multiple SIM cards for multiple destinations. But still, the device, once equipped with the SIM card, can be sent to multiple destinations without having to worry about the fact that, oh, maybe where the device lands, I need to use a different IMSI because of this and that regulation, or because coverage is not provided by the bootstrap IMSI there. So in this case, this is possible. In this case, a single SKU can be equipped within a device and shipped all around the world, complying with all the needed regulations. The second solution that is available on the market is using UICC, M2M or consumer UICC, sometimes also called eSIMs. In this case, each profile has its own IMSI potentially, and therefore, if I move from a profile to the other, I can not only change the, let's say, configuration with which I access the network, but I can also change the provider itself. So I can move from provider A to provider B. The downside of this is that it has costs, meaning moving from one profile to the other implies some transaction costs. The upside of it is that this is a GSMA compliant technology. So another thing we've been doing at FlowLive is make sure that customers around the world can access the best of both worlds. So what we've been doing is we've been creating a multi-IMSI profile within a UICC SIM card. Therefore, customers can have the freedom to choose the IMSI they like or the IMSI they need for a specific case, can have the advantage of having a single SKU to serve global use cases or very local use cases in specific countries like Turkey, for example, can also take the advantage of using a single connectivity management platform and a single billing system, billing plan, to use different core networks around the world, though. And on top of this, they can check out at any time they want. So they can change from provider A being FlowLive to provider B being any other FlowLive. Now, we build this in order to democratize connectivity. We build this in order to make the access of connectivity as easy as possible for as many enterprises as possible and as many applications as possible. And today, what we can do is to add to our IMSI library, to our global hyperlocal network, another very important milestone. So as I mentioned before, we built a global hyperlocal network because it's important not only to cover a specific country with multiple networks, but to cover every single country in the world, also countries in which there are specific regulations. But it's more and more important also to cover areas where there is no terrestrial cellular network, because there are many applications that require connectivity, and so far they couldn't be successful simply because they didn't have connectivity, they didn't have cellular connectivity where they've been deploying. So with this, I want to pass the presentation to Stefan from Cellular, that can introduce you to what they've been doing and therefore what we will be doing together. Stefan?
Thank you, Luigi. Thank you for that great presentation. And I think it's very clear that FlowLive has great products, and that's exactly why we're so excited to partner up with you. Now, I'll just go ahead and share my slides. 1 second, sorry. Here we go. And you there said a very interesting word, which we typically always use as well. And you mentioned the democratizing connectivity. I mean, before getting into the specifics of Cellular, the technology, the ecosystem, and the timelines, the essence of Cellular really was exactly what you said, Luigi, is to democratize connectivity, is to make IoT connectivity accessible not only everywhere and to everyone, so that the digitalization of key sectors which haven't had the opportunity to digitize as fast as other sectors which have benefited from terrestrial connectivity are now able to really adopt IoT at scale. And with that essence, with that mission in mind, came the goal of Cellular, which was to deploy the world's first low Earth orbit satellite constellation following 3GPP's release 17 for narrowband IoT. Now, the main reason why we set out to do this, it's a simple reason, really. If you take a look at the world's surface today, not much of it is actually covered by terrestrial networks. Only 15% of the world's surface has actual telecom terrestrial cellular connectivity, and that means that many sectors, among them agriculture, maritime, transport and logistics, oil and gas, renewable energies, haven't had the chance to really adopt IoT technologies at scale up until today. And if you take a look at the concentration of IoT connections, of course, it follows the concentration of telecom infrastructure, and therefore the massive IoT adoption up until today, at least, has been really limited to cities. Now, companies within the sectors that I mentioned a second ago are very interested in adopting IoT technologies, and today, really, they have two main alternatives. Or they can put up their own infrastructure, or they subscribe to current satellite services, which are cost prohibitive when we're speaking about actually scaling their deployments. Now, if you take a look at the satellite industry up until today, every single operator out there on the satellite side has gone through a proprietary protocol. Now, that means for final customers, expensive costs for monthly connectivity. So the subscription actually costs a lot. And the customer also has to invest in the particular hardware, the chip, the module, the final device that only works with that one particular company. What happens is that once you start scaling, the TCO, the total cost of ownership, is just, way too high to allow for massive scalability. And of course, you get locked in with that one provider. There's no interoperability between networks. And if for any case your provider happens to come to some problems and is not able to provide that service anymore, well, then of course the whole investment that you've made, that the company has made to integrate that device within their ecosystem, disappears and is not really usable for any other networks. Now, of course, with the introduction of narrowband IoT to space, extending it so that satellite operators can also use it, the scenario is a bit different, right? On the one hand, Cellular is offering standard NB-IoT connectivity. As we've known it, the Release 17 supports the previous features of NB-IoT. And on the other hand, we're also a standard carrier ourselves. Cellular's business model is focused on being full B2B in the sense that we do not go directly to end customers. What we're doing here is creating a network that is able to provide carriers like FlowLive an extension of NB-IoT connectivity, utilizing standard frameworks that have been used within the telecom ecosystem for decades now. As a high-level architecture plan, say you have a release 17 module connected within a city, for example, in a container in the back of a truck. That device within terrestrial coverage would connect to the cell towers as it does today. Once that device leaves the coverage zone and has no cell towers in range anymore, that device automatically switches and connects to our satellites. The satellites then receive the data, forward it down to the ground station. From the ground station, it goes to our core network. Our core network fully integrated via an IPX provider with FlowLive. Information goes to FlowLive core network, and from there on, it's business as usual and goes to the final customer. This is what we love saying: carriers, customers, and SIM cards, our constellation. Now, we've taken every single step to ensure that from a carrier perspective and consequently from the customer perspective, it's fully transparent, right? So obviously 3GPP release 17 NB-IoT from the network side means that the UEs, the user equipments, the IoT devices will be fully standardized. We are providing a roaming extension to carriers, so we're not really serving customers directly. We won't be selling any devices, whether those be chips, modules, or IoT devices. Our focus is really on serving carriers with a global NB-IoT service, and we integrate via wholesale structures like you would in any other case with any other carrier all over the globe. Of course, we do believe in a global revolution powered by NB-IoT, especially with now the introduction of non-terrestrial network. If we take a look at scenario today, and Luigi, you mentioned that in your first slide, indeed, the demand for LPWA devices is growing. And if you take a look at the spread or at the differences within that demand, especially for cellular LPWA, NB-IoT since 2019 has grown exponentially more than any other cellular protocol. So customers want to use NB-IoT, and now the network is shaping up to actually allow them to deploy their use cases using NB-IoT. Now, satellite IoT has also become the world's first fully standard satellite operator to be part of the GSMA. And that's exactly why we're able to integrate with carriers in such a seamless and transparent way. And we'll be going through the standard contractual frameworks regarding roaming integrations with our roaming partners. And of course, this is the first time in the history of telecom and satcom that the 3GPP has actually decided to extend a terrestrial protocol into space, which gives life to our mission and makes all of this very possible. Building on that, this is the 3GPP, which means by consequence, of course, satellite IoT is not alone here. This is not something that we've built hidden away from the world. More than anything, this is a culmination of an ecosystem move towards making standard satellite connectivity a reality. Now, all of these companies that you can see on the slides have been present and were present within the 3GPP and worked exclusively on Release 17 for narrowband IoT. Of course, all of this ensures the hardware compatibility, and I'll get into that in a second. But the big difference here is that for the first time, you have satellite operators that have up until date been really secluded from the telecom terrestrial ecosystem, being able to fully integrate and become part of the telecom ecosystem. And that's really the beauty of the service of the technology. Now, of course, as many of you know, any releases within the 3GPP come as a consequence of years and years of work, of years and years of meetings, and of contributions from every single player within the group. Here you have the exact same list from my previous slide. The only difference is that at the right of each company, you have the total amount of contributions made to Release 17. NB-IoT. So on the left, the companies pioneering this forward: MediaTek, Ericsson, Huawei, HiSilicon, Qualcomm, Thales, Xiaomi, Samsung, Lenovo's in there, Sony, Intel, just to name a few. Now, from the satellite operators, and you can see all of them, Satellite IoT is in orange and the other ones are highlighted in gray. We have been the most active contributor to Release 17 NB-IoT in the space ecosystem. So this is not only something we're implementing, this is something that we have helped build from the ground up. And that's exactly why we have such an advantage and that's exactly why we're the first movers, right? We understand the technology, we have built it, and we're now implementing it. Thus why we'll be the first LEO operator out there with the commercial service. Now for customers, which is the interesting part, what does this mean? Well, they'll be able to purchase off-the-shelf NB-IoT products from the vendors they have been doing so their whole lives, and those products will be compatible to both terrestrial networks and non-terrestrial networks. As I mentioned, Satellite IoT will never touch, sell, or produce any hardware just because we don't have to, right? The compatible chipsets will come from the legacy chip vendors out there: Qualcomm, MediaTek, Unisoc, etc. The compatible modules will come from the legacy module vendors out there: Quectel, Fibacom, Nordic, uBlock, Sequence, and so on and so forth. So that's the first time that you have, again, this ecosystem, and we're able to fully become and integrate within this ecosystem, and therefore allowing customers to use their vendors and use the technology that they so well know with terrestrial and satellite. This is what we like to say again: a unique offering allowing massive IoT adoption everywhere, right? A little bit more about our service. We are speaking about 100% NB-IoT coverage. As long as the device is outdoor and there's line of sight to the sky, there is not one place on Earth where we don't offer our services. We will not provide indoor connectivity, but of course the beauty here is not only providing satellite connectivity, the beauty here is allowing the same chip, the same module, the same device ultimately to alternate between cell towers and satellites depending on infrastructure availability. Typically indoor applications happen in cities, and that's where the cell towers, well, the terrestrial infrastructure would take the lead. And once those devices leave the cities, are in remote and rural areas, that's where our satellites come into the game. A big limitation, I would say, up until today, at least with NB-IoT specifically, has been the lack of roaming between networks. It makes it very hard for international mobile use cases for devices to actually move between countries in a simple way. And with the introduction of NB-IoT on the satellite side, well, that changes the scenario. So Satellite IoT actually acts as a global roaming provider, not only because we're setting up roaming agreements with telecom operators all over the earth, but more importantly, because our service is global by nature. So as long as a device has a SIM card that identifies that device to our network, the device can switch between geographies really. It's not a problem for a satellite or for the network. Now, a little bit more in terms of compatible hardware. I'm sure the audience will have many questions on this topic. So the first thing I want to say, probably in my opinion, the coolest thing about 3GPP's Release 17 is the fact that a lot of the work within the group revolved around ensuring that there's no need to change the hardware, right? So that means that Release 17, from a UE perspective, from a chip and module perspective, is all about updating the firmware of existing modules that have the capability of supporting the correct bands. By consequence, these modules will have the same antenna, 23 dBm, 0 dBi. They'll have the same form factors, as we know. They'll have the same size, the same power consumption. So really, it's a genuine extension of updating what is there today regarding software and allowing that to connect to the satellite. The link budget is the same, and therefore, because it's only a firmware game and doesn't imply a hardware change, really our expectations is that the cost of these modules will be the same as we typically have seen within the terrestrial ecosystem, between $5 and $15. And from our conversations with chip and module vendors, we are expecting the commercial rollout to happen aligned with Satellite's commercial rollout by the end of Q1 2024. Now, a lot of discussions, there's a lot of questions revolving GEO and LEO. And I've said this before and I'll say it again, I don't think one is better than the other. I think these are complementary technologies used to serve different use cases, right? Here we have a comparison table. First of all, let's start with the GEO. I mean, the cost basis, it's higher than LEO, and that's obvious why it's higher than LEO, because for you to deploy and maintain a geostationary satellite constellation, the investment needed for that to happen is much, much higher, and therefore it makes sense that you're charging higher prices for that service, right? The scalability, we say here, it's limited to the amount of satellites currently in orbit. Now, one of the benefits of low Earth orbit is that you're able to launch satellites quickly and effectively based on the needs of your customers. And therefore, if at any given point, Satellite IoT or any other LEO constellation runs into capacity obstacles, or that capacity is coming at a stop, obviously the solution there is to launch more satellites. Within geostationary satellites, because these satellites orbit the Earth at a high altitude, once they're up in space, they follow the rotation of the Earth. And therefore, one satellite does not provide global coverage. You would need to deploy many satellites to cover every single point or every single, the entire Earth. In terms of the angle of sight, and this means the angle to which a device needs to see the satellite, within geostationary satellites, they are all sitting at the equator, right? So in terms, in order for the device to connect to the satellite, that device has to always aim at the horizon. In case it doesn't, well, it makes it quite hard for that device to connect to the satellite because the satellite won't move from where it is today. And of course, geostationary satellites provide continuous and real-time connectivity. So if we take the high costs, the continuous real-time connectivity, the fact that they have to always aim at specific angles, it all leads to geosatellites being really well positioned to serve critical and real-time applications. On the LEO side, as I mentioned, these are lower cost constellations. You can always launch more satellites and therefore increase the capacity and scalability. With one satellite, you already provide global coverage. The satellites are orbiting the Earth at an altitude of 550 kilometers, which means they pass around one device once a day. Of course, because the satellites are orbiting the Earth and not stationary, they will pass over a device over many angles, and therefore if one of the passes doesn't allow the device to connect, the next pass surely will. And on the other hand, these are continuous services, right? The user equipment connects to the satellite when the satellite is overhead. And based on those set of capabilities, LEO satellite constellations are best used to serve what we call the massive / LPWA IoT use cases. Really, again, Satellit's aim is to allow for the massive machine type communications to happen over the satellites. Now, satellite deployment roadmap. So first of all, the per message payload is 200 bytes. Okay, that's the amount we are able to send per message. Each pass of the satellite allows between 2 and 3 messages to be sent. Okay, so within each pass, if each message is 200 bytes, you're able to send between 2 and 3. So for 400 to 600 bytes per pass. As I mentioned, this is a discontinuous connectivity service. So UE connects the satellite when satellite is overhead. The more satellites we launch into space, the more times in a given day devices can send and receive information. With 4 satellites, which we'll have, we've launched 1 satellite back in April with SpaceX. It's not being commissioned. We're going to launch 4 more satellites between September and the end of 2023. Once those 5 satellites are up and running, we'll provide an average of 4 connections per day. By the end of 2024, we'll have 64 satellites, and that provides an average of 1 connection every hour. And by the end of 2025, the plan is to have 256 satellites offering near real-time connectivity. So as long as a use case needs it, devices will be able to send and receive information every single minute. And finally, for our commercial timeline and service, satellite service will be available starting Q1 next year, between the beginning of Q1 and the end of Q1. As I mentioned, we just launched the world's first low Earth orbit satellite for narrowband IoT in April, and we're all very excited about that. That opens up the doors for the POCs for us to start demoing and testing the technology with our partners. In Q4, we'll launch 4 additional satellites. Once those 5 satellites are up and running is when we'll go commercial to the market in Q1 next year. Thank you very much for your time and for listening.
So thanks a lot, Stefan. Much appreciated. So by creating this joint offering together with Cellular, what we are doing is trying to make at least the word bit, if you allow me. So we allow customers to access connectivity, cellular connectivity within a single standard without having to use proprietary or private protocols everywhere in the world using different technologies with a single solution. So by single solution, what we mean is that together with Cellular IoT, FlowLive is adding another IMSI to our already existing IMSI library, which, as we said before, is the largest in the world at present, so that every device accessing connectivity through FlowLive can access cellular coverage even in remote locations, deserts, oceans, anywhere in these 85% of the world that is not covered, as Stefan said. It can access it seamlessly through a single SKU to a single SIM card that can offer cellular terrestrial cellular connectivity where available and non-terrestrial cellular connectivity where this is the only solution. We do it with a transparent business model that allows for optimizing costs of connectivity. So if you put together the fact that every SIM card, every device is going to have a true global connectivity in every single place of the world, together with the fact that we have a pricing model, a business model that really optimizes costs, this means that lots of new IoT use cases can now be unlocked. All customers and entities accessing this service will access all these connectivity options with a single unified bill. And within this unified bill, they will also enjoy 24/7 support, globally available. It's a human support, and it's available in US, Europe, and China, and across Asia. They're going to have real-time visibility with access and control and the opportunity to troubleshoot terrestrial cellular connectivity and non-terrestrial cellular connectivity in the same way, via the same portal, and with the same capability of troubleshooting, thanks to the fact that Cellular IoT offers a quite important stream of data, stream of interactions and events from between the SIM and their network, being a non-terrestrial cellular network. And the beauty of this is that all these platform, all these single pane of glass can be fully white labeled for any customer that requires to do so. So we reached the end of the presentation. I've seen that we have quite some questions waiting to be answered. So I think we have enough time, Manuel, to answer these questions.
Yes, sure. Let's go. Let's start with the first one. Okay, there was one question related with if the deck is going to be shared and the recording of the webinar. And yes, the answer is that the recording to the webinar, it will be posted in the NTN community, exactly where it was the same announcement that it will take place. It will appear after a couple of hours. It will appear the recording. And also for the pitch deck, anyone who is interested, they can reach out to us and we can be sharing with them. There is also one question related with the coverage. Is this offering valid for India as well? I think both of you can reply to it.
Yeah, I think for what concerns FlowLive, India is definitely within our global network. and we also offer a local IMSI for permanent roaming in India. And I think, Stefan, you can clarify about satellite IoT coverage in India.
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Yes, the answer is yes. We are going to be present in India and throughout the globe. I mean, genuinely pole to pole, as long as your outdoor and line of sight is there, there is not one place on earth, region-wise, where we won't be providing our services.
Okay, we can go for the next one. When you say true global non-terrestrial coverage, how is it with the landing rights?
Yes, that's a very good question. So there's two levels to this, right? The first one is on the network side, of course, the satellites cover the whole Earth. And then there's a regulatory aspect. Regulatory aspect is split between two different dimensions. On the one hand, you have the ITU license, which we have for our full constellation. And on the other hand, you have Cellular as a company has to coordinate with each individual entity within each individual country to make sure that we can use the spectrum that we want to use over that country, which is what you call landing rights. Now, our goal, our mission is to be available in every single country, and that's what we're working towards. But of course, we have a list of priority countries based on customer demands that we're currently working on. And of course, I mean, we're starting off with those countries that you can imagine need the most satellite connectivity, which are very big pieces of lands with rural and remote areas. So that's the landing rights right there.
Okay, thank you, Steph. And there is another question related with for FLOLive, related to the IMSIs. Is there any access charge depending on the geographical area?
Yeah, okay. So changing between one IMSI to the other within our multi-IMSI profile, being these on a standard SIM or an EUICC SIM card, is free of charge. Our we call it access charge, or we call it platform fee, is included in our pricing. And there are some countries, very few. Brazil is an example. Turkey is an example, in which there are some additional monthly fees to respond to local regulations. But in general, across the globe, beside these two countries that I mentioned, there is not any additional access fee to change between one IMSI to the other.
Okay, thank you. And regarding multi-IMS and over a USICC, is this the case the device needs to have also the local MNO certifications, like for example ATT or Verizon in the US? Is this correct?
So this is a good question. It's a question on which there is a lot of unclarity. So this actually doesn't have much to do about the SIM being a UICC. This has to do with the IMSI being a local IMSI. So the answer to that is, if the SIM card at that point in time is accessing the US territory using a local US IMSI, then yes, it's mandatory to go for the related certification. Otherwise, there is not a mandatory need to go for the certification if you're accessing the territory with an IMSI which is in roaming mode. Now, there are situations, and we have a solution for that. There is a solution that FLOLive offered to access the country, that specific country, the US, for example, with a local IMSI that still allows roaming on all available or the main operators being Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile. We can add more context to it via email if needed.
Okay, thank you, Luigi. Well, another question for Stefan. So an existing narrowband IoT module will just be able to use your satellites?
So the short answer to that is, well, it depends, right? So the way this works is, if you have a NB-IoT module out there in the field today, odds are you're going to have to change that module. Now, that doesn't mean that the hardware in itself will be different from what you're using today. So the way this works is there are a multitude of modules within the module vendors' portfolios that have the RF capability of supporting the correct bands, right? And we've done, we actually released an RFP last year to understand what are these modules, if they are available, and literally every single module vendor has modules which can support the correct bands. Now, these module vendors, Quectel, Fibacom, Nordic, Ubok, etc., will then use these modules that have the capability of supporting the correct bands, update the firmware of those modules, of course, with a compatible updated chipset with the correct firmware, and then release those modules to the market for sales, right? So the hardware in itself won't change, but these will be new modules in the sense that they will now support release 17 NTN and will have the satellite capability, and therefore will be sold as new modules. I don't see the firmware being available for OTAs, for example, just yet on the field of existing modules.
Okay, another question for Stefan. I will merge two questions that are related with LEO and GEO satellites. One of them was about the advantages of using LEO instead of GEO, and the other was if you can cover the whole globe with only 3 satellites.
Yes, so the advantages are, to sum that up, LEO is more cost effective, and therefore you can deploy more satellites and, of course, devices. They are spinning around the Earth every single day. So one satellite revisits the same device on Earth once a day. And therefore, that means that whatever angle that device is placed, if in one of the passes the satellite doesn't pass over the device, or the angle is not good enough, then of course the next pass or the pass after that will be good because the angle of the satellite changes. And on the GEO side, if you can cover the whole Earth with 3 satellites, possibly. I would rather not say. I don't have the exact answer to that, but with LEO, definitely 1 satellite already covers the whole Earth. Okay, it's just what changes is the amount of connections in a day. So the amount of times devices can send and receive information, which is dependent on the amount of satellites you launch. The more satellites you launch, the more connections in a day devices will have. For LEO and for GEO, these are continuous real-time connectivity services.
Okay, thank you, Stefan. Another more question for FlowLive, for Luigi. Can an eSIM be considered for connectivity?
Yeah, okay, so maybe this question, we need to specify exactly what we mean with eSIM, because it's a term that is widely used, but it's not extremely accurate, actually. So if by eSIM we mean a machine-to-machine EUICC, then the answer is yes, of course. If by eSIM we mean a consumer EUICC profile, so QR code, basically, that can be consumed via a camera or via a link, then with FlowLive, this is also an option. We can upload an IMSI, being, for example, the satellite IoT IMSI, within a consumer EUICC profile, so within what is called on the market eSIM, and a device can consume that IMSI via this profile, via this specific profile. If instead by eSIM, Aldrin, I think, who asked the question, means then a SIM on chip, so an MFF2 format, that's also an option. It's just a different format. It can be a standard MFF2, it can be an M2M EUICC, or a consumer EUICC MFF2. In all cases, the answer is yes. It's possible to use all the FlowLive IMSIs, including satellite IoT, with all the SIM support, the SIM form factors, as well as with soft SIM cards, so virtual SIMs.
Okay, great. I think it's covered. He was referring to eSIM based device, but I think that you covered it as well. So the next one is also for Stefan. and are there any additional requirements with respect to the antennas? And are NB-IoT bands standardized globally? Which frequency or bands are supported by Cellular?
So the first question is no, there are no additional requirements for the antennas. These will be standard 23 dBm, 0 dB antennas, same as you can find today in cellular IoT modules. Second is yes, these are globally standardized bands for NTN and NB-IoT, specifically band N256 and N255. And on the satellite side, you're able to use the L band, which is between 1500 and 1600, and the S band, which is between 1980 and 2010. Okay, our first 5 satellites will be on the S band, so 1980 gigahertz to 2010 gigahertz, and our remaining, the future satellites will support both L band and S band, depending on the batch.
Okay, next one for FlowLife again. Is your LP1 offering only with narrowband IoT, or are there any other networks supported?
So the LP1 offering within the FlowLife network includes narrowband IoT for a number of countries through a number of IMSIs, including the satellite IoT IMSI, so the satellite IoT global coverage. And then it includes LTM, or even called CAT-M1, which is another LP1 option for a number of countries with a number of IMSIs. This is not available for non-terrestrial connectivity, as I think, Stefan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that the bandwidth is a bit too high for this kind of application. If instead the question about other LP1 networks was more towards LoRaWAN or Sigfox technologies, these are not cellular technologies, so there's not cellular standards, they are not GSMA recognized, so we don't offer it within our network because ours is a cellular network.
Okay, thanks. There is another one related to coverage. It's saying West Africa is an untapped market, especially for rural commerce, using POS terminals in very remote locations. Any NTN coverage plan for Africa?
Yes, definitely. Africa is within our roadmap for, not the whole Africa, but specific countries within Africa for the first year of commercial operations. Now, the POS is an interesting use case, although I fear it might be better suited with real-time, or at least close to real-time connectivity. But yes, we'll definitely be covering Africa.
Great. There is another saying, is the satellite services transparent to the SIM user of FlowLife?
Yes. So once satellite IoT performs the commercial launch, as Stefan anticipated before, end of Q1 2024, and by then we will have also integrated the IMSI within our IMSI, what we call IMSI library, so within our network. The IMSI from satellite IoT will be just like any other IMSI, any other of the 12 existing IMSIs that we have. So let's say would be the 13th IMSI for FlowLife. And as long as customers, when going to FlowLife, will ask for that IMSI to be configured during production on the SIM card, or later on at any stage, at any point in time, via over-the-air update to the SIM card, then they can use it in a very transparent way. They don't need anything specific. They don't need any specific commercial terms different from our standard commercial terms.
Yeah, and that's exactly Cellular's vision is really to allow for the seamless use of our network. What we envisage is really that the operators offer this to their customers using the same contractual framework, and that it is no different than signing up for a add-on service like you would in any other case. It's just the difference is that the infrastructure is now in space other than on Earth, but exactly.
So the same way a customer uses cellular connectivity to roam in a different country from where they are, they can use the same service to roam with non-terrestrial networks from satellite IoT in places where there is no terrestrial cellular connectivity available.
Great. Another one for FlowLive is the sense that I have tracking devices. If I lose cellular coverage, will I automatically connect to satellite coverage, and then when back, I would connect to cellular coverage?
Okay, so let's specify the use case here. So let's start from the assumption that this tracking device is equipped with the narrowband IoT module that Stefan described before. So a narrowband IoT module that has the required bands, that is commercially distributed as capable of connecting to narrowband also via satellite. And starting from another assumption that is on the SIM card that has been put in this device, any form factor, as I said before, but on this SIM card, on this profile, there is the IMSI from Satellite IoT among the other IMSI. So let's say the SIM card holds, I don't know, 3 IMSIs. One of these is the IMSI from Satellite IoT. Then yes, when the SIM card does not find any access to terrestrial cellular connectivity, it will switch to the IMSI of Satellite IoT and it will connect via that IMSI, so to their network, to Satellite IoT network. When the SIM is back into terrestrial coverage, it can switch back to the terrestrial coverage. I'm saying it can because since FlowLive owns the SIM applet, so the little firmware running on the SIM cards that we distribute, we have the freedom to decide what we want to do. Actually, our customers have the freedom to decide what they want to do. They can ask us to switch automatically to Satellite IoT IMSI. They can ask us to switch back automatically to any other IMSI that they wish, or they can tell us, I want to use Satellite IoT as my preferred IMSI wherever I can, or the other way around. I only want to use Satellite IoT only in places in the middle of the ocean where I don't find any other option. So the answer is, taking these assumptions, then yes.
Great, thank you, Luigi. And can FlowLive or Cellular give an indication of the price per megabyte of the service? Will it be the same as the commercially available terrestrial narrowband IoT?
So I can give my 2 cents, and then Luigi, if you want to jump in, of course. So the first per megabyte cost. So to start with, we won't be charging per data usage. And now there's a really simple reason for that, is that NB-IoT is really low data. And if you couple the low data of NB-IoT with the availability of connections per day when Cellular starts its commercial service, then it really makes no sense to charge per data, especially given that Cellular is based on a B2B roaming model. BCE is not really a thing yet, and would make it very hard to use tab files to charge per data for NB-IoT. Second point is that we believe towards customers, it will be a much simpler and easier and more attractive proposition. And again, this is not up to Cellular. We can say to our carrier partners what we have learned. Anyways, towards the customers, we believe charging a fixed price per month per MZ or per SIM card on our network without a data cap is, well, easy to understand and very easy to use. In terms of pricing, we will define a pricing together with our carrier partners, like in any other roaming scenario, and then they can decide what pricing they release it to the end customer. But what I can tell you is that we will be by far the most cost-effective satellite solution in the market. A few dollars per device per month is what we're looking at.
Yeah, so the 2 cents cover the question, I think, Stefan. So we will include Satellite IoT within our IMSI library. So our customers will be able to access it with the platform fee, which in that case can include the fee that Stefan just mentioned. And they can just switch to it whenever they want, as well as to any other IMSI that we offer.
Okay, the next one is, will the narrowband IoT over satellite allow voice or texting? So
for now, for the voice, no. I mean, unless you compress it to a really small, but probably not. What we're looking is at pure data. And texting, well, there's a possibility if you take a look at, for example, the bullet phones, they're using an NB-IoT chipset in those phones. And of course, as long as the phone has a NB-IoT chipset, then yes, you can allow for SMS or texting within the capabilities of the network. But Satellit's focus for the beginning is massive machine type communications within LPWA applications.
Okay. And next question is, as a device maker, I want to use your solution. Do I have to integrate some snippet of code, or is everything managed by the SIM applet?
No, as we said before, as long as you have a capable module that is accepting narrowband also from non-terrestrial networks, then everything is managed by the SIM applet. You don't need to add anything within your firmware. You just plug the SIM in and it works in the same way as with the terrestrial narrowband IoT. That's the beauty of it.
Okay, great. Thanks. There was another, can you explain in which use cases I use the EUICC with multi-SIM IMSI, and when should we use only multi-IMSI?
Come again, Manuel, because you were breaking up a bit. Sorry.
And can you please explain in which use cases should I use the EUICC with a multi-IMSI, and when should we only use multi-IMSI?
Well, that is really up to the user, meaning it's really up to you. Using a multi-IMSI or an EUICC with multi-IMSI from the user experience point of view is basically the same thing. The EUICC with multi-IMSI has a higher cost in general because it has the RSP platform to be taken care of, which is the platform that allows moving from provider A to provider B. So let's put it like we could describe it as an insurance model. Let's say if you want the freedom in the future to move from provider FlowLive to any other provider, then I would suggest to use the EUICC with multi-IMSI so that you can benefit from the multi-IMSI capabilities as long as you are with FlowLive, moving between one IMSI to another with no additional cost. And then if at any point in time, unfortunately, for whatever reason, you want to move away from FlowLive to a completely different platform, completely different offering, you can do it via the EUICC protocol. So it's really up to the user. There's not a case where one works and the other doesn't work.
Thanks, Luigi. There was another question that I didn't read before, sorry. It was for a LEO constellation, isn't a must for the modem to have also GNSS?
So there's two answers to this question. The way this works is in order for the device to synchronize with the satellite, and therefore in order for the device to support features like EDRX and PSM, in short, in order for a device to wake up when the satellite passes over and then go back to sleep when there's no satellite communications, of course, the device and the satellite have to be synchronized with each other. And that includes, especially for mobile applications, the use of the device's location, right? And in that case, yes, it is ideal for devices to have GNSS, for the modules to have GNSS within it. Now, for static applications where devices are not going to be moving at all, you can code the coordinate of the device, and therefore, if it's not moving and the satellite knows the coordinate of that device, and that device will always remain there, then you don't need GNSS, right? The GNSS is important for mobile applications so that you can always have an accurate location, and also for the synchronization to happen. If the device is not moving, then GNSS is not very needed. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Steph. And there is two other questions, but due to the time, we will be answering them by email. I will reply them and also attach the emails of our speakers so they can provide you with the best answer. So thank you very much to the two panelists that we have here for the interesting speech that we just had. And
Thanks everyone for joining and for listening. Thanks, Stefan. And thanks, Manuel, also for hosting us.
Thank you, Manuel, for hosting us. Thank you, Luigi and FlowLive. And yeah, everyone, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. As Manuel said, my email will be there, and we will be sharing the slides over the next few hours. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you.